Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Lamido Sanussi was right. An official audit of Nigerian state oil company reckons that it's held back around $16 billion from the government. A similar claim from the ex-governor of the central bank lost him his job. In Democratic Republic of Congo, calls for the release of a pair of pro-democracy activists continue a year on from their arrest. 18 demonstrators are arrested at a rally in their name. And we go out on the job with a French vet who's been working in a chimpanzee conservation centre in Guinea for the last 15 years. The country has the largest chimp population in West Africa, but the numbers are still threatened because of poaching. Well, first, an official audit has concluded that in a suspected fraud, Nigeria's state oil companies held back around $16 billion from the government. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation hasn't come up with a reason for the missing funds, but the findings, though shocking, are not a surprise. Former central bank governor Lamido Sanussi pointed out that billions were missing from the treasury and got sacked for the trouble a couple of years ago. Our Chika Odua joins us with more.
This is not the first time this accusation has been made. This is not the second, it's not the third, nor will it be the last. And as you mentioned before, central bank governor Lamido Sanussi did allege in 2013 that $20 billion in oil revenue had gone missing, and he had actually named the former petroleum minister, who was the leader of OPEC at the time, that's Mrs. Alison Madueke. So he was dismissed because of such a controversial allegation. So it's interesting that this is coming back up again. President Buhari has described the corruption in Nigeria's oil sector as mind-boggling. And I think that this is actually an indication that Buhari is serious. Let's remember that Buhari has taken the portfolio of the Minister of Petroleum. So Buhari is acting as not only the president of Nigeria, but as the Minister of Oil, just so he can manage what exactly is happening in the oil sector, which of course is Nigeria's moneymaker. So this is where a lot of illicit dealings goes on. And of course, who regulates what comes out of the money really takes control of what happens in Nigeria's politics, because of course, Nigeria's oil sector contributes more than 80% of Nigeria's GDP.
Now, Chika, does Buhari keeping such a close eye on the country's oil sector mean that the money, $16 billion, has any chance of actually being recovered?
You know, I do think that he will put in a great effort. And let's remember that the United States and the UK and also Switzerland have agreed to help repatriate some of Nigeria's stolen funds. Earlier this month, Nigeria and Switzerland did sign an agreement to return $300 million confiscated by one elite family, the Abacha family. Of course, Abacha was a former military dictator, and most of his money did come from Nigeria's oil wealth. So this is just one of the many efforts to repatriate the stolen money of Nigeria. And I really do believe that Buhari will make another case to do that as well. And actually what he's been doing, Buhari, he's actually offered a pardon to some of Nigeria's politicians to say, if you've stolen money, just return it. You know, we won't go after you, just return it. So perhaps he'll make that petition again.
Chika Odua there for us in Abuja. Now, the leaders of Benin and Togo headed to Abidjan on Tuesday to show their solidarity with Ivory Coast in the wake of a deadly assault there over the weekend. Beninese leader Boni Yayi stressed that acts of terror are of international concern, whilst his Togolese counterpart, Forna Singbe, called on the region to pull together to face the threat of extremism. 18 people were killed on Sunday when gunmen opened fire on a beach resort in the Grand Bassam area of Ivory Coast in an attack claimed by Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. Now, South Africa's Supreme Court rejected an appeal by the government against a ruling that the state had broken the law by letting Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir leave the country last year. On Tuesday, the appeal court accused Pretoria of disgraceful conduct over Bashir's departure after his attendance of an African Union summit in South Africa. Now, he's subject to arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court and the South African High Court in connection to charges of genocide.
We're very pleased with the judgment because it clarifies South Africa's legal obligations in terms of our own legislation and in terms of our obligations to the International Criminal Court.
Several protesters were arrested in the Congolese city of Goma on Tuesday as rallies were held in support of two jailed activists. They were held a year ago amidst heightened tension over suspicions that President Joseph Kabila is trying to maneuver his way back into another term in contravention of the Constitution. Human Rights Watch has also called for the pair's immediate release. Thomas Nicolon tells us more about the latest demonstrations.
Fred Boma and Yves Makwambala have been behind bars for a year now, and people inside of DR Congo and outside of the country have been asking for their release. Today, Human Rights Watch asked for their immediate and unconditional release. In Goma, in eastern Congo, people were marching as well. They were protesting to support the two young activists, and during this protest, 18 people have been arrested. The provincial chief of police said that they were arrested because they were disturbing public order. Fred and Yves, who are in prison right here in Kinshasa, started a hunger strike yesterday night. They were arrested last year in March. They were attending a meeting on good governance in Africa. This political situation is still very tense in DR Congo. The opposition believes Joseph Kabila wants to stay in power. They believe he wants to run for president for a third time in November this year, which would be unconstitutional.
Thomas Nicolon there for us. Well, finally, we meet a French vet who's been working in a chimpanzee conservation centre in Guinea for the last 15 years. The country has the largest chimp population in West Africa, but the numbers are still threatened because of poaching. Our correspondent spent a day on the job of protecting the primates.
Christelle is bonding with her little protégés, 3 baby chimps rescued from traffickers.
When we get them back in a horrid state, it's heartbreaking because they can't talk, but they can express so much just by looking at you. I think they really don't understand what's happened to them.
Christelle, who is a veterinarian, wants to give these chimps rescued from poaching a chance for a normal life and to one day release them back into the wild. She started her work with them in 1999 at the conservation centre she's now been managing for a year.
This is their last meal of the day. They've all been fed.
She looks after 52 primates with the help of her team.
We cannot let them disappear. They have a right to live just like us. And they're very important to the ecosystem like every animal here. Yes, my girl.
Working with chimpanzees along the Niger River means living in the middle of the bush, an enriching experience for volunteers. Christelle is still amazed this now is her way of life.
I did an internship at the end of my studies in a zoo in France, and the vet there just asked me one morning, "Would you like to go work with chimpanzees in Guinea?" I said yes, so a total coincidence, and then Guinea and the chimpanzees. It wasn't my dream as a kid. I'd never thought of working with chimpanzees, but it was love at first sight. And for Guinea too. 15 years later, I'm still here.
Christelle hopes to stay even longer and in 2 or 3 years to release a group of chimpanzees back into the wild.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and please do so again if you can. Take care.